I'm sure.
She wasn't a happy camper.
Oh, that's not good. Okay, well, we can get started. Okay, so we're calling this meeting to order at 7:01, and we'll start with the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, our first order of business, a motion to approve the agenda.
Make a motion to approve the agenda.
Second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, the agenda is approved. And on to the approval of open session minutes from December 19th, 2016.
Motion to approve the open session minutes of December 19th, 2016.
Second. Any discussion? Any issues? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
So the open session minutes from December 19th, 2016 are approved. Student comments.
First, there is the Worcester County Superintendent's Luncheon. This annual luncheon will be held tomorrow at Clark University, honoring Nipmuc's top scholar of class of 2017, Dr. Marushek, Principal Clemens, and honored senior Kylie Gallagher will attend this prestigious event where other scholars from Worcester County will be honored by local superintendents. Tomorrow night, Nipmuc will welcome current 7th and 8th grade students and their parents to our Nipmuc Showcase to learn about our school, to our classroom, ask questions about the transition to high school, and meet with our students, teachers, and parents. It'll be a fun, interactive, and informative evening that has been planned to learn about Nipmuc. I will actually be volunteering at it. This Friday, January 13th, 105 DECA members will travel to Boxborough Holiday Inn to participate in the District 7 DECA competition. These students will be competing with students from approximately 10 other schools in their district, analyzing case studies and business situations along with taking a category-specific test. Students are analyzing and finding business solutions in the areas of marketing, business law, hospitality and tourism, apparel and accessories, finance, human resources, and sports and entertainment. The top 5 competitors in each category, whether it's a team of 2 or individually, will advance to the state competition, which will be held in March against the best in the state. Last week, a representative from World Challenge gave a presentation to freshmen, sophomores, and juniors on the upcoming World Challenge trip in Iceland in July 2018. World Challenge expeditions are student-led adventures that provide high schoolers with numerous opportunities for personal growth through an experience of international travel, community service, a backpacking trek, and daily leadership roles dividing labor amongst the team members. The community service project in Iceland will be based around the environmental challenge of sustainable energy. The backpacking trek will be through the volcanic wilderness of Iceland, hiking through lava fields by hot springs, through black sand and Glacier Street.
That sounds very cool. Sign me up. Okay, awesome. Community comments. Any comments from our community? Okay, moving right along to superintendent comments.
All right. Good evening and Happy New Year to everybody. First and foremost, we received some press attention. I know there was something in Milford Daily News, but I wanted to publicly acknowledge the Upton Selectmen for the consideration and the approval of a grant that we recently put in that Jay Beyer did the heavy lifting on for the amount of $20,186 through the Racine Fund to be funded 2 laptop carts, one for Clough and one for Memorial. Each will have 30 laptops on it, and I think these will be really instrumental in helping the amount of purposeful technology integration that's happening in our elementary schools. Keep in mind, we've had a lot of attention to our one-to-one learning program, but our 2 elementary schools, when push comes to shove, still only have 1 computer lab per, approximately 425 students. So it can be a challenge. As you know, with our new literacy program and our new now mathematics program, there's a lot more online applications, assessments, and so on. And then we also have the issue of the challenge of the new version of the MCAS being administered online. So I think this is definitely a step in the right direction, and the fact that it's grant funded from within our community is very, very helpful. So thank you to the Racine Fund, and thank you to the Upton Selectmen. Second piece that I have to report on is really, I would say something that's long overdue, and something that we need to put a little more time and attention to, is reconstituting our CPAC, or our Special Education Parent Advisory Council. We have not had really an active, vibrant CPAC within the district since the 13-14 school year. And part of this is just lack of participation, a lack of parents being in leadership roles, and so on. So per our district action plan goals for this year, our goal is to reconstitute it, get something active up and running again. So we have a planned meeting this coming Monday, 3 weeks from today, Monday the 30th. It'll be 7 o'clock here. We will be sending out both Blackboard Parent Link emails and text messages to our households to let them know about this and to publicize this. And our goal is to not only have a regular meeting with all those bullet points, but also to have some meaningful programming for our parents, whether it be on transition, whether it be on the college planning process, and so on, and getting that up in place between now and the conclusion of this school year. Okay.
So you said January 30th
January 30th
at 7?
at 7 here at the PDC. And then last but certainly not least, I put in your packet a letter of intent retirement from Misco Hill's principal, Ann Meyer. I accepted that with mixed feelings. I say mixed feelings in the sense that, like many of the Misco staff, I will be sad to see her go, but on the other hand, I'm also happy for her, in the sense that if you know Ann, you know that her big bruising grandson, John, is the light of her life, and Ann, her daughter, is expecting a second child. So as Ann has talked about, and also as she discusses in her letter of retirement, she's delighted to commit to grandparenthood on a full-time basis. And keep in mind, Ann has been with us for the past 15 years in many capacities, as started actually as a PTO president and parent, and she was also on the building committee for both Clough and Memorial, then transitioned to being a science and math teacher, then assistant principal, in the last 6 years as principal. So as I say in my background notes, I don't think that there's anybody who works harder than Ann or is deeply committed to the success of Misco students. So I know all of you wish her very well. With all that said, we've got a very large task of coming up with Ann's successor. So what I've put in your background notes is a tentative timeline and some of the key tasks that are involved, that will be involved in the hiring of a new middle school principal. So I think one of the first things is updating the job description. We have a generic principal job description that dates back to 2004. I don't think it's a stretch to say in the last 13 years the demands of the principalship, both from a management and also an instructional leadership perspective, have changed dramatically. So I think we need to update that. That can be done in relatively short order. The vision would be to post the position for approximately a month. That would be through mid-January through mid-February. Simultaneously soliciting and selecting a screening and interview committee. And this would be a committee involving all stakeholders. It would be teachers, students, parents, administrators, something that's manageable but also comprehensive. And then that screening committee, obviously, they're making the call on it, but doing an initial round of interviews, something that's reasonable, something probably in the ballpark of 6 to 8 candidates selected for an initial interview would be typical. And then that committee ascertaining how many to move forward to the finalist stage. And usually the final stage is somewhere in the ballpark of either 2 or 3 candidates. I think to do this well, then we have, usually the finalists come and visit the school community, and that way they have the opportunity to actually touch base with all stakeholders, groups of students, groups of parents, groups of teachers, and so on. Then boiling it down to the finalists, and that could be a day-long visit, it could be a good portion of a day. And then also conversely, taking that screening committee and having them visit the finalists in school or district to kind of get a sense of the work that that candidate has done within the district. So the last phase would obviously be selection and appointment of the new principal by myself. And I think the target date is April 1st. And I think that's a good date because that gives the new candidate, the new principal rather, at least a couple months to transition with Ann Meyer and also to transition with the staff. So that's the vision as far as tasks that are involved in this search. It would be my hope that we'd have at least a couple representatives from the school committee to serve on the screening and interview committee, because I do think that their work will be critically important. So does anybody have any questions or thoughts regarding any of that?
Can you give me an idea of that selection committee? Like, are you thinking like 2 school committee, 5 teaching staff? Like how big?
I think you want, realistically, a committee that is in the 12 to 15 range is probably best. You don't want it to be too cumbersome. I mean, think about the poor candidate walking into a room like this, and they're sitting down with 30 people. And trust me, 30 people. I think it's equal. It's generally, there's nothing hard and set, but you want to make sure that you've got solid representation from all the stakeholders. I would say off the top of my head, a minimum of 5 or 6 middle school teachers, possibly, Paul Marshall. I haven't had a discussion with him whether he'll be going for the position himself. In the event that he's not going, he would be a key member. Probably somebody from central office like Maureen Cohen, even though we really haven't had an explicit chat about it, would be helpful. And then obviously 2-3 parents, a couple school committee members, 2-3 students that might be interested, so on, and there you have your 12 to 15.
How will you, like in the example of parents and staff, how will that be communicated?
I think what we'll do is we'll have a period of time where we will send out a Blackboard Connect, and we will send out a Blackboard Connect email asking for solicitation. And we'll probably actually do it in a Google form and ask people to respond to 2 or 3 prompts. Because I fully anticipate we'd get more people interested than there would be spots
Yeah,
on the
that's
committee.
that's why I was kind of curious how you would make your selection.
I think it's also important, and we will reinforce this, when we have opportunity, I think it's important that you establish that committee, but you also have mechanisms for the committee to be able to touch base with other groups. For example, it probably makes a great deal of sense to have somebody from the Misco Hill School Council or the Misco Hill PTO to be on the committee. That way they can reach out to their larger networks on the PTO, or somebody, a parent who's actively involved in the robotics club, or something to that effect. But I think one of the key pieces too is we'll also build into the process, particularly once we get to the finalist stage, ways where the search committee can also get back and forth feedback from other stakeholders. I do think those finalist visits are really important in that during a finalist visit, and I've gone through the process as a principal, but I also went through the process becoming the superintendent of this district, having, it could be very, very tiring for the candidate, but I think it's also important to have the candidate in district for something like 6 or 7 hours, where they can touch base with small groups of parents, small groups of students, small groups of teachers, and then we get their collective feedback after those meetings. I think those are really illuminating.
Yeah, I think that's important to communicate too, because you probably will get, I would say, a good amount that might reply, but to let them know that, even if it's not as part of this selection committee, that there's still going to be other opportunities to meet with the candidates that we're kind of whittling it down to.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And making it very clear, the screening committee, it does have limitations by number. However, there will be multiple opportunities for folks to give feedback, and their feedback is very valuable to the process. Okay.
That's good. I'm glad to have a timeline. We appreciate Anne's service and all she's done for the school and her level of dedication for sure. But I think this will be a big piece to chew.
Oh, sure.
To
And
find
it just
this
coincides
person.
really nicely with the budget process too. And that's what I have for my comments this evening.
Okay, moving right along to subcommittee updates. Policy Subcommittee, second reading and approval of updated policy GBEBC, gifts to and solicitation by staff. So I think we've done a first read.
Yeah, actually, I think Tana's the chair of this.
She is.
Yeah, so I'll pinch hit for her. So this is the second read and the approval of a revised policy GBEC, gifts to and solicitations by staff. And if you recall from last meeting, this is just adding, I believe it's all of 3 sentences to kind of cover the district in the event that anybody were to solicit funds through online crowdsourcing websites like Donors Choose or GoFundMe. And essentially, the verbiage just says before a teacher were to take something like that on, it would need prior approval by the principal.
Okay. Okay, so if we are going to get the approval on that, we'll need a motion.
Make a motion that we approve amended policy GBEBC.
Second.
Okay, assuming we don't have any further discussion, since we just brought it up. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so it passes. Okay, on to old business and the MSBA.
Okay, what I put in your packet was kind of an explanation of the MSBA's accelerated repair program. Just last week, all superintendents throughout the state got an email from the MSBA notifying us that the window is now open for the MSBA to accept statements of interest for either new construction or repair projects. I thought this was rather timely, seeing that our last meeting we discussed the pretty comprehensive list of capital projects, but the largest dollar amount projects were Nipmuc's roof, now that we're on year 20 of this building, and then also the new leach field and relocation of the well at Misco Hill. So I give you this as the background. Jay and I are in the process now of exploring this fully and looking at some of the specifics. To submit a statement of interest or two statements of interest, you have to do them for each individual school. So the first being the Nipmuc roof project, which we know would be covered by the accelerated repair program. It's questionable whether they will cover the septic and the well project for Misco Hill, even though probably ironically there could be a greater need for that project than the roof project. I view it in this vein. I think it's helpful to get this done, if for no other reason, to get our district and those projects in the queue, so to speak. A lot of school districts do submit a statement of interest knowing, oh, it probably won't even be considered until 18 or until 19. And the MSBA just allows you to roll over your statements. So I think the window that we have here, the submission has to be by February 17th. So we've got approximately 5 weeks to investigate this and then put something together. So in the event that we do, it would have to be brought forward to first this committee and then both of our communities' boards of selectmen. So we'll do our due diligence, but report back at our next meeting on the 23rd. I don't know, Jay, if there's anything that you want to add to that?
Not really. There's two options, the accelerator and then the core project. Now, my guess is the well, septic, and all of that would be the core project and not the accelerator. I think the accelerator is really only roofs, windows, doors, similar to
Boilers.
this door with boilers, right? I think we should try to, basically get the paperwork created and we can talk to them. Even if it's something we don't get into this year, at least we get the process started, get our, plant the seed that we're looking at both of these things coming up.
So one thing that I wondered about, and I don't know how much they drill down to specificity. This building opened in September of 17. Am I correct in that?
November, I think it was actually, wasn't it, that we moved in? Veterans Day weekend. Yeah.
Veterans Day weekend of 97.
Right. So we're really not
So we're-
20 years in yet
Yeah.
until November of 2017.
Okay.
Even if we go through the exercise and don't do anything with it, at least we'll know what to do as we go forward.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, moving along to new business, talking about the turf field exploration committee.
Okay. Since October, we've had 3 or 4 meetings with the turf field exploration committee. Kind of a reconstituted committee. There's a lot of folks that were on it going back to the 14-15 school year. Some new parents, some new expertise, along with a lot of the folks that have been with us originally, and I see a lot of them in the audience today. I'd like to invite, if the two of you could just maybe come up to these seats, Bob Gilchrist and Mark Allen, both of which live in our community, both by training, correct me if I'm wrong, gentlemen, are civil engineers.
Correct.
And Mark is a civil engineer who owns his own firm, and Bob is a project manager for a construction company in Rhode Island. They've been an absolute godsend on this community, on this committee rather, in the sense that they have a lot of know-how, they've been involved in these types of projects, and they've been able to guide a lot of our thinking. Just as background where we've been to date, the committee met for about a 9-month period in 14 and 15. We used Gale Associates out of Weymouth to do a comprehensive athletic campus evaluation master plan. And they really touched base with all stakeholders, particularly our coaches, our student athletes, people who really knew our athletic program. And you could see in the comprehensive report, which this committee went through back in 15, what the deficiencies are. And I don't think that there's anything there that should be a shock, that we've got playing fields that are overtaxed, we've got issues with irrigation, with drainage, the fact that we don't have any track and field facilities here. We've got a lot of challenges with regard to wetlands. There's really insufficient seating for spectators. There could be some issues with ADA compliance as far as entryways and to get to the different fields. We have absolutely nothing that's lighted, and there's no type of amenities built in, anything like a press box or anything like that. Essentially, our Warriors Club boosters are good enough to set up a tent, or tents as it was on Thanksgiving. So that original master plan proposal really was, I would characterize it as, in a perfect world, how would we reconstitute our existing athletic complex? And essentially the vision was to take the area where our existing baseball field is behind the school and to put in a football, soccer, multi-purpose field with a 6-lane track around it, a lighted field. To adjacent to that, the existing softball field, to reorient it, because the concern, and probably since the beginning of 20 years now, has been the sun is always in the player's eyes due to the orientation of the diamond. To place where the existing back field hockey and lacrosse field is a turf multi-purpose field, and to take the front field and move the baseball diamond to that front field that runs adjacent to Pleasant Street. So the challenge, obviously the perfect world is this would address all deficiencies. Having 2 turf fields would really enable us to expand and to maximize our existing programs. And I think it would be a great solution if we had 2 turf fields for our many youth leagues within our 2 towns. Not to mention increase our potential for raising revenue through rental opportunities. The biggest con of all of this, you can see by that first bullet point, is looking at their rough cost estimates. It's really cost prohibitive. You're talking, over a $7 million project. It would be costly, but it also would take a lot of time. The vision would be done in 3 phases over 2 years. They haven't really nailed down how much excavation would be involved. It would involve, moving a considerable amount of ledge, also construction of new parking. And then there were some concerns, as we discussed back a year and a half ago, with potential permitting issues over wetlands. So we've taken this, then we had this wonderful thing called an operational override happen. So I think this was kind of put on hold. So we've revisited this. And I'll kick it to Bob and Mark to talk about, since we've been meeting since October, what's some of the thinking?
Thank you, Dr. Mishra. For those who I haven't had the chance to meet, I'm Bob Gilchrist. I'm a lifelong resident of Upton. Married my wife Amy, who's a lifelong resident of Mendon. We're raising 3 kids here. My wife happens to work right down the hallway in the math department. Our oldest son was Valley Tech graduate, but he's at Plymouth State right now, thankfully a senior. Our daughter Elizabeth graduated 2 years ago from Nipmuc and is a successful sophomore at Roger Williams. And our youngest son Ben is a freshman here at Nipmuc, involved in football, indoor track, ski club, and whatever else he can get his hands on to. As Dr. Mushik said, I'm a civil engineer. For the last 15 years, I've been doing almost exclusively school construction, including most recently the Franklin High School project, where I met Chris Schmidt and worked with Chris for 2 years before Chris transitioned over to Nipmuc to become the new athletic director. And it was really that relationship that got me involved this fall in talking about the fields with my son playing football and with my experience in school construction, having built all kinds of different athletic facilities, where we started to get involved and started to talk about what we could do to improve some of the deficiencies on the field. As Dr. Musik said, we've been meeting since October, taking a look at new options, taking a look at the previous plan, which I think everybody can probably agree at over $7 million was probably never going to get off the ground to begin with. The other concern that I had in looking at the original plan from a few years ago was the amount of disruption to the program over the course of 2 or 3 years. Moving the baseball field into the current football soccer field location just disrupts too many sports over the course of a couple of year, 3-year period. It doesn't really give any room to accommodate the existing and keeping sports here on campus for any great length of time. We sat together and everybody on the committee kind of had a common mission, and that was to explore and gain support for an affordable solution, number one, that met the needs of the school district and the community needs. Almost every one of our meetings has taken a look at how we can expand the access of the facilities. My son played on the 8th grade youth football team last year that went to the Central Mass Championship. And one of those playoff games, we had to rent fields from Ashland because there were no local fields available. So money was paid to Ashland to host the 8th grade football team over there. Just if you can provide local facilities and meet that, that's just one of many examples that we've talked about to bring those kind of things back closer to home. One of our initial meetings, we did meet with the representatives from Gale Associates. We talked about brainstorming and scaling down the proposal, eliminating some of the more costly things, trying to focus on some reuse of existing facilities. How can we minimize the amount of disruption? Don't completely revamp the whole plan of putting the field on top of the baseball field. And that resulted in a revised plan, which I think is on the next slide here. And what this plan involved was kind of focusing on the football soccer field as, if you will, a primary field, and kind of limiting the scope of the project to 2 phases. And that would be to focus on the front field, putting down a turf surface, putting in a moderate amount of additional bleachers with the required ADA accessibility, a press box, which does not exist right now, and putting lights on that field as the primary option. In my work, I get involved all the time in analyzing the options for different school districts and playing fields and things like that. And one of the most interesting facts that was shared over the course of the last year is if you take a look at a natural grass field in New England, throw out the winter that we had 2 years ago where basically you almost lost the entire spring season. And on average, you can play about 500 hours per year on a natural grass field in New England before, when it's dry enough in the spring to play on and before it freezes up in the fall. About 500 hours a year is what a field can manage. An artificial turf field in New England can be used about 1,000 hours or twice as much time on the same field because you're not as susceptible to the weather. If you add lights to that artificial turf field, you double it again. So the same field that you were able to use with natural grass for 500 hours, you can now use for just over 2,200 hours. So you can certainly accommodate many more youth programs, many more high school programs, more practices, and you don't have to strictly limit that field use to a game field, if you will, as has been done in recent years. The second phase, if you will, of this redesign proposal was to take a look at the current field hockey lacrosse field in the back and take a look at the possibility of putting a second turf field out there, making that more of a multi-sport field for focusing on field hockey and lacrosse, but also with the possibility of putting a track around that field. Limited bleachers, but with lights as well, again, to expand that availability and the hours of use. That second phase is going to depend mostly on what we're allowed to do relative to the wetlands and the soils and the topography that's out there, which will be, Mark will talk in a minute about some of our preliminary planning stages and the next steps of what we've got planned. So I think I've talked about most of these points here with the plan, the 2 athletic fields, both being lighted, potential 6-lane track with 8 lanes on the straightaway, and those things are typically dictated by MIAA rules, and those rules require the minimum standards if you're going to host tournaments and things like that. There was an article, I think, in the recent Milford Town Crier about the revenue that Milford realized by hosting district games this fall, including our own soccer team state championship game. And they, just from the concession stand alone, I think brought in $10,000 on Friday night and Saturday night with championship games just on 2 games. So if you meet those MIA standards, you all of a sudden can be in the running for hosting those games as a neutral site. And that may be something to keep in mind for the future. New grandstand for both fields, the press box, and then paved accessible walkways and retaining walls where needed. At this point, I'll turn it over to Mark Allen, and Mark can talk a little bit about the cost estimating and further steps that we can take.
Good evening, Mark Allen, Allen Engineering out of Mendon. I'm also a Mendon resident, have been for about 12 years now. Unlike Bob, my wife doesn't work down the hall, but she works down the street. She's the middle school guidance counselor for the 5th and 6th grade, Kathleen Allen. She's been here about 12 or 13 years. And we have 2 beautiful daughters, one in 4th grade, one in 8th grade, very active in sports, drama, band, just love the community. This is where we're going to stay. So I got involved a little bit later than Bob, probably just a couple of meetings ago. I was asked to come on board just to kind of take a listen and review the Gale Associates proposals and see where the direction was going. And it just dovetailed perfectly with this committee because I'm sort of on the design and permitting end, and then Bob is sort of the construction end, so it would work very well together as far as this committee goes and if the project goes forward. Gale Associates, to this point, has the 2 turf fields that Bob just outlined and gave Joe very detailed proposal as to what needs to be done moving forward. And the way design and permitting goes, you don't get really good hard cost estimates until you reach a level of design of about 50 to 75%. So Gail has taken it to about what we call the concept phase. There's a concept phase, there's a preliminary phase, there's a permitting phase, and then there's a construction, all different levels of design. So we're at about 10 to 15% now. In order to get real hard numbers for cost, to take to a town meeting, we need to get to 50 to 75% design. And based on the Gale's numbers to date, they're looking at about a $50,000 budget. And for that $50,000 to get there, you need to do on-site topography, you need to do on-site soil testing, you need to flag and identify all the wetland resources, and then you need to do an engineering design as far as what kind of utilities, what type of sewer you have, water availability, electric, lighting. So get a good package to a site contractor that can get you, not the $7.5 million, but we're trying to get it down to the $3 to $4 million range. So being a local civil engineer, surveyor, wetland scientist, I'm offering my services to the school committee to basically do it for almost half the price, for $25,000 to get that preliminary set of drawings out to bid to get some numbers to move forward. So that's basically where I am. I've put together a proposal, sent it to Joe for you to take a peek at. But I think in order to move forward with even the thought of it is just to basically, can we do it on the site that we have? The wetlands are going to be critical, buffer zones, and then zoning issues that are going to come into play with the stands. And locally I've worked, with Kelly and the building inspector, the Conservation Commission, very familiar with the local officials and all the permitting agencies that need to be done. So,
I think at this juncture, I think it's warranted that the committee have a discussion in that, do you support the concept? I think support the concept moving forward to the board of selectmen. I thought the multi-board would be a good spot to bring the players together to continue this conversation. It's kind of interesting. Every so often, just to see what's happening, and a lot of times, most days I read the Milford Daily News and the Metro West Daily News online, and all four of these headlines have been out literally within the last 4 weeks as far as projects. And it's interesting that Bob brings up this statistic about living in New England and the playability of regular grass fields. I think this is becoming more and more the norm as a solution for communities, okay? We're not talking about super affluent communities here. I think it's becoming fairly mainstream. So I think this is a solution that's desperately needed, not only for Nipmuc, but I think for our communities. And like most things, if I'm presented with a problem, I go back to what our district mission and what our vision is all about, okay? We talk many times, particularly during budget season, about programming that we put in place to give our students a competitive advantage, okay? Part of that programming is athletics. Okay, to be very clear, academics do come first, but athletics are extremely important as well. Right now, by really the condition of our athletic complex, we're not giving our students the competitive advantage. And again, our vision statement around those 3 key pillars of excellence, innovation, and continuous improvement, I see this as an advancement that's critically needed for our students in part of that cycle of continuous improvement. So I think it's an important decision. I think your support is vital and critical to moving forward. If anybody has any questions or any commentary, think about the seasons that we've had recently. I think, John, it really was an embarrassment of, success that we had in this past fall season. Wouldn't you agree, John, Chris?
Absolutely.
As far as
A lot of chilly nights out in the cold, celebrating success.
as far as league championships and the runs that we made in the playoffs and then state championships and so on. And as I was putting together these pictures, and actually, unfortunately, Tana's not here. Tana was the official photo mom of the soccer team. I took these 3 great shots, and then I said to myself, and all 3 of these shots, our kids are in an away field. No, all 3 of them, they're on a turf field. I think it's long overdue that we have this conversation and we make some tangible plans to move forward. So anyway.
Just to add, Dr. Ruszczyk, the question about finances comes up continuously, and I had a conversation earlier today with somebody about the maintenance costs. And maintenance costs on turf fields have actually shown to be a fraction of the maintenance costs that are required on natural grass fields. So there's a cost savings that falls into play there. Most of the headlines that Dr. Ruszczyk showed, most of those communities are all talking about different sponsorship, different fundraising, different cost sharing means. I mentioned the youth football team paying to rent off-site fields, out-of-town fields. They also every year rent light towers just because the hours that they're playing on and practicing on in the afternoons in the fall. I know that there's a certain local lacrosse group that pays another town in, I think it's Medway or so, every year to rent their facilities to conduct their things. So there have been numerous different kinds of fundraising opportunities and cost-sharing opportunities that can be looked at to help defray some of the cost and then provide a first-class facilities for the kids.
Where do you want to start?
I'll start with you.
So you get no argument from me in the point that we actually need something like this. And I think the engineering component is clearly the next step that needs to be done. The question I have is, have we actually sat back and thought about the financing approach of it? Has someone built a financial model to understand how we would fund this? Because I think saying that you're going to go back to the towns, because I've heard various different things, saying you're going to go back to the towns for all the money I think is probably inappropriate. And so I think we need to make sure that if we're going to move forward with this, we need to have some view towards what that financial model really looks like. Are we asking for a third of it from the town? Are we asking for a third of it to be private capital donations? Are we going to fund a third of it from operational kind of revenue expenses, to your point? Because I would agree with you fully. You go from being able to use a field at 500 hours in a given year to, let's say, just for round numbers, 2,000. You're able to rent out, a number of those hours at higher revenues and pieces like that. I mean, the reality is we should have a payback period that's fairly short. But what does that financial model look like? I think that's the big piece that we need to make sure we're clear around, or that we've got an idea and a framework around that we can actually take forth, because that's where the selectmen are going to ask the questions, that's where the FinCom are going to ask the questions, and I think the multi-board makes all the sense in the world to bring it forth, but they're going to jump right on that in about 3 seconds.
Yeah, and to that point, I think what I mentioned earlier was 2 steps needed. I think even occurred before that is, one, we have to make sure that these 2 fields can physically be built with the constraints of soils, ledge, wetlands, will it physically fit? Secondly, once you get this preliminary level design, you can actually at least get that starting number to work your budget backwards and say, is it 7 million, is it 2 million? Once you get that, hopefully $3 to $4 million number, then how do you work with Jay to figure out, can CPA funding be used, can private donations be used, and then you figure out that model, because you have a number to get to. I think that's what we're here tonight through Dr. Ruszczyk, is just, let's see if it can be done, and what number would it be done at.
So, but that starts with the 25,000, because that's where we all have to begin. And would
Correct.
that be, where would that be funded from?
I think it could be, ideally between the regional school district, but also the two towns. I do think that it's important to bring the players together and also get the commitment of all the players that this just is not something for the regional school district.
Because it has community-wide benefits.
Correct.
Agreed.
So what would you be asking for from the towns, and what would you be asking for from the school?
Like, what would the breakdown be? What would it look like?
I think it could be a 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 split, or we could even technically break it amongst based upon population. But probably the simplest thing would be a 1/3 split.
So the next step would be going to the multi-board and see how open they are to starting this process, because this is where it all begins with feasibility. And
Correct.
We're at about the 10% concept phase with the Gale Associates. No hard numbers have been done, no hard topography, so in order to get a good number for construction budgets, you need to get to this 50 to 75% design level.
And you said their rough estimate is
10 to 15%. Correct. It goes 10% to 15% as a concept. Preliminary gets you 50 to 75%. Then you go to your permitting, which gets you to about 90%, and then construction drawings are 100%.
so what Gail has done is only the 10% mark, is what
Correct.
you're saying? Okay.
Correct. It's a concept.
It's a
They
concept
looked
of
at the
what
overall
potentially
property.
could happen,
You could
but
do
no
this, you could do that.
feasibility.
Correct. Where do you want to go? What does the town want to do? What is the vision? How many fields do you want to do? And they give you the 40,000 foot overview of what your needs are and what could be done, and they give you a rough ballpark. But now it gets down to trying to get to the nitty gritty, and can you physically fit it? What will it actually cost? What do the soils look like? How will the drainage work? Those type of questions can get answered a lot better. And you can get a lot better detail. I've been in communication through this committee with a couple of local contractors who have built recently these athletic turf fields. One is WW right in Upton here. They do a lot of work. Andy Leonard is a local guy from Upton, and he's been doing work on these fields for years, and he's willing to give us cost estimates moving forward, but he just didn't have the level of design to give us a good hard number.
So I guess the next step is multi-board.
Absolutely. We have
Oh,
to
nice
reschedule
segue.
when we get to other.
Nice segue, right, yeah. Okay. Does anybody have any questions before we move on?
Or
Thank
any
you.
commentary? I know we've got a lot of folks in the audience.
Any comments, anything? Everybody's good?
So, a lot of very, very dedicated parents, coaches who've been with this for quite some time. And I know I can speak for the committee in thanking all of you guys for just putting in a lot of heart and a lot of effort into this. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Okay, do we have any correspondences?
We do not.
Okay. So I have a couple other matters not anticipated by the committee within 48 hours of posting. The first is Golden Apple, and pulling together a committee to review the nominations for Golden Apple. So I don't know if we want to try to nail down a date.
I think that would be really wise.
And find out who would like to serve on that committee, if we have any volunteers, and then we can also solicit some parent volunteers as well, at least one. So we're planning to present on the 23rd, correct?
Yeah.
Correct.
So then we need to go next week. 2 weeks. Tuesday is the NITMUC, oh no, that's this week, sorry, I'm in the wrong week. Tuesday, the 17th looks good. How do people
That
feel
looks
about
good.
that? Does anybody, I guess we should start with who else would like to serve. Would you like to?
Yeah, I'll
You're
volunteer
good?
that, yeah.
Any, I don't want to exclude or plea, anybody? No? I'm good.
Best not to have people.
I'm good with volunteering as well. So-
Okay.
So how does
So I've
Tuesday, the
got
17th?
Dorothy,
And we need to recruit a parent to volunteer. I can ask Gretchen.
Gretchen
Who has
would
served
be great,
on
yeah.
before.
Yeah.
Okay. So Tuesday, what time frame? Any,
You tell me.
Dorothy, what does your schedule look like? I'm free in the afternoon. I get home from work at like 5, later.
Yeah, that's 6.
Do you want to say 6?
Yeah.
Will you be back by then? Okay.
Yeah, I'll be back.
So my conference room?
Yep, that works.
Perfect.
Okay, Golden Apple at 6. Okay, and then the other thing that when we were starting out, before we started the meeting, we were talking about how there's a conflict between the next multi-board, which is next Thursday evening, not this Thursday, but the following Thursday, overlapping with the SI kindergarten information night. And Joe, you had mentioned that we hadn't kind of reached out to set that date as the multi-board, so maybe we could go with a different date.
Yeah.
Are you thinking the following week?
That would work for me, but I know the world doesn't revolve around me.
I think we gotta set a date, and whoever can make it, can make it.
I just know that I had already committed to the SI night, so I definitely could make it last Thursday. And Dorothy, you were saying the
Yeah,
same thing.
I'm attending also, so I won't be
Okay.
to the 19th.
So do you want to go for then the following Thursday?
26th?
Joe? How does that work for you?
Let me check it out.
Okay.
Perfect.
That works.
So let's say Thursday, are you in town?
I'll be in
Thursday
town.
the 26th?
Yep.
Okay, I will send that out tomorrow.
There's only 26 here. Let's see if I did change it. I changed it. Okay. We have 2 dates. Okay, so future agenda items include the MERS-D Makerspace pilot on January 23rd, as well as the presentation of the Golden Apple Award on the 23rd too, and the district action plan progress all on the 23rd. And then February 6th, we'll have our MERS-D first pass budget. So that looks like it concludes everything. Okay, so I believe we're ready to adjourn. If we can get a motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Any discussion? None? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, we are adjourned at 8 o'clock on the dot.